welcome everybody to this webinar, and also the people in the room with me as well. If you have any questions as I go, just let me know. Otherwise, enjoy the show. So today we are going to do a portfolio webinar, and it's called The Story of You. And today I'm just going to talk about some of the techniques and styles of portfolios that I like to show people, and that what I use myself. And if you have a little bit of a hard time hearing me, just let me know. Right now it looks like my audio is working well, but I am using some new equipment today, so if there are any issues with that, just let me know. I'd be happy to try to tweak up the volume a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation, and enjoy the webinar. Thanks for coming. Okay, so portfolio, the story of you. Okay. So the main goal of today's presentation is to talk about how using technology to make your portfolio more useful. And I want to talk about how you don't just want to show, but tell about your accomplishments. We want to show you how you can use the portfolio to get your story straight. If you know your story, then you can tell it well. Also, I want to show you and help you use your portfolio to answer questions in the interview, which is kind of why we're making the portfolio in the first place. An effective portfolio. So we're using a portfolio to help tell your story and define your value at an interview. We're going to show you how to use some more modern creation techniques to do that, because I feel that a portfolio is not just a scrapbook of reference letters and awards anymore, but it can be more useful than that. So let's just go back to why we're creating a portfolio in the first place. It's to organize and reflect upon your accomplishments with clarity. And I think we know that, and we know what a portfolio is. But why are we also creating a portfolio? Is to easily show and tell about your accomplishments where the opportunity arises. And so this is the part I want to focus on, is the showing and telling part, because we all know that we can stick our documents into the portfolio, and they're there, and in their physical pieces of paper are in our portfolio. But I want to also focus as we go through this on how to tell about those accomplishments and not just show them. It's also to remind yourself which accomplishments are related to the position that you're interviewing for. Because don't forget, the reason why we're creating the portfolio is we hope that we can use this during an interview. And we all know that it is to provide proof of accomplishments, so that's nothing new here. So the goal, I feel, of the portfolio is to present some tangible examples of your accomplishment. Now, accomplishments versus experiences. So the portfolio should distinguish between experiences such as duties and tasks and accomplishments that define the value of the time spent in a position. So the showing part is where you basically have your credentials, your awards, your reference letters, or anything else that you've acquired through your career stuck into some binder, and you can show that to people who ask you if they'd like to see anything in there, or if you'd like to show them your awards or newspaper article or anything that you have to show them that might be impressive. I want to talk about that's using it more to tell about these items and the usefulness and the value of them. So we'll talk about different types of portfolio, and I'm always going to come back to the whole telling your story concept as we go through this in every step of the way. So we know that the traditional style of a portfolio is basically a scrapbook, or I like to call it a dumpster of awards and credentials and reference letters in their physical form. So, but I like to give that a little bit of twist, and I call it the modern concept, I guess, because it is a little bit different. And I like to talk about the portfolio as a story, right, of you, or a chronicle of your career, and more importantly, the accomplishments that you had in your past experiences. And the goal really is for you is to know your accomplishments well and define the value of them. And then even further is to connect those accomplishments and value to the job that you're interviewing for. And so there's a few different types of portfolios. We have the table of content style, the TOC. We have a roadmap style, a timeline style, and a storyboard style. So we'll just go over those different styles here a little bit. So the traditional table of content style is basically you have a mission statement, a career summary, the goals, you know, a resume, some samples of your work, awards and honors, degrees and educational qualifications, letters of references. So that is the traditional style of a portfolio, and it is useful in that it has all of those elements in there, and they're easily able to pull those elements out when you need to, hopefully during an interview. Let's take a look at some other styles. So I like to call this one the roadmap style, and from the graphic here, it's just something I pulled off the internet, but it gives you a bit of an idea of the roadmap is good for newer entrants, I think, who wish to map out their careers. So the roadmap is where they want to go, and if they are a newer entrant, they will be asked where they want to be in 5 or 10 years, and so the roadmap style should help to answer that question. You can do a little bit of design on this too. This is just done in PowerPoint, and so you can build yourself a really neat visual of your roadmap, and you can put some text in here to remind you of what things you want to accomplish or what you have accomplished. And this is kind of a fun design, and it's great for new entrants because maybe they haven't accomplished a lot yet, and so the roadmap shows them where they want to go. So they're at point A, and point B would be where they want to ultimately end up in their career. Maybe not in 30 years, but maybe in the next 5 or 10 years. And so this roadmap style I find will help people just starting out in their career, and it doesn't even have to be that they're 100% sure of where they want to go, but the roadmap helps to answer the question that they will get at an interview. Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? The timeline style that you see here in front of you is my favorite type. This style allows you to build a timeline of your accomplishments. I usually ask people to put their professional benchmarks at the top, and so they can stick them in on a timeline and literally just tell, as you can see, a story about their professional accomplishments. And so in here, you might not have a lot of space to tell a whole story about a professional accomplishment, but you can make a comment about it, like increased sales or decreased costs or built a new software, or it could even be finished a graduate program. And there's a really good idea I have down at the bottom here of just create a separate page with the full story, because you want to know your story, because if you know your story well, you'll be able to tell it well. And people really like stories at interviews because they get a sense that you might have a degree or diploma, and a lot of people do, so that's not really that interesting for interviewers. So you need to have a story behind this, and again, the timeline portfolio style helps you to outline those stories well and to stick them in a timeline that helps you understand your background and where you want to go really well. Because if you understand your story really well and you know your story really well, you'll be able to tell your story really well. At the bottom of this timeline, I usually recommend putting your personal benchmarks, and so there might be things that you've done like volunteering or something you've learned on your own that will also be a personal accomplishment that you should put on your timeline. And then most importantly of all, which of these are related to the position you're applying to? And so that's why before you go into an interview, you can open this up and reflect on it and get a sense of what items in here are the employer that's interviewing you, which things in here are they going to be most interested in, and if you're asked certain questions, you might be able to use this timeline to explain your development. Here's a little bit more of a sophisticated timeline, which is more of the one I'd probably use, where it literally has all of the things that you've done Now this one goes back from 2009 to now because you don't want to go back too far. Again, the examples I have here are, a certain job that you had, but then you have accomplishments, and that's the most important thing. In this case, you've built a new staff manual, and then another job, and then we move on down the timeline, and you have an award for improving job satisfaction. We move down the timeline, you have another accomplishment of increasing participation in health and safety, and our promotion. Using the graphics, I think, makes this fun for people, and it gives them a really good visual, so when they're on their way into an interview, this will also help them remind themselves of what their story is and where they're coming from. And the visual can be really, really good for people because you're already stressed out, you're going into an interview. The last thing you need to look at is a bunch of text on a white piece of paper that outlines all of this stuff. This way, it gives you a sense of visual that you can think about in your mind as you're going through an interview. We all have awards and stuff like that stuffed into our scrapbook of a portfolio, but keep in mind though, is you do want to have a story behind each and every one of those items, and in this case, this will help you keep that story straight. And the most important thing you want to think of is which many of these accomplishments in your background are related to the position that you're applying to. That's the most important thing too, as well, for using this portfolio. Now, let's just talk a little bit about the technology piece here. This is created in PowerPoint, so each one of these elements is just another little image found in PowerPoint. And they're clip arts, and so it's really easy to build in PowerPoint. And the best thing about using PowerPoint to build this portfolio is you can print it out and stick it in your physical portfolio, or you can create hyperlinks. So you can click on your accomplishment and have it open up a new page where you might have more of a story that you've typed out in there, so that you're not always rethinking this over every interview. Why did I get that award? Or what did I do 3 years ago when I got that promotion? So you get your story straight, you put it on paper, and then you're not stressing yourself out trying to think about all those details over and over again all the time. And this way it's captured, and again, it's just all about the story of you. Now this is an example of a portfolio timeline that I found online, and this one's pretty sophisticated, but it's organized, and it has all of the things that this gentleman did that are noteworthy. And again, which of these are related to the position you're applying to? And so this is a pretty sophisticated version of the timeline portfolio, but I think it's a pretty good one. Here's another good example of a timeline portfolio, a little bit different, but very visual, very easy to look at. And again, it's a reminder for this person when they're going into interviews, what is their story and how does their background fit into the future of this position that they're applying to. And again, here's another example. So totally different, a little bit more simple, but it does the job. Again, these are all just simple graphics found in PowerPoint or almost any software. So it's not very difficult to build, and again, it gives you a really good visual of where this person is. You can share this portfolio with your employers as well, and give them this kind of information if they wanted it, but it is pretty much just for you. It's just to help you get your story straight. Here's another style, the storyboard. This style works well for those who may have varying position types or changes in their career. And so each element is kind of a separate element on its own, as you can see here, and I'll show you this one as well. And here's more of a storyboard. Now this person here has had a retail clerk job. Then they went to college. Then they had a placement. Then after the placement, and this happens a lot, they didn't get the job that they took the placement for, so they're back as a retail manager. and then they got a job as a law clerk. Then there's a mat leave for a new family, and then here they are now as a job seeker looking for new opportunities. So this storyboard, I think, works really well for people who have had separate and varying changes in their employment status. And then again, it just helps them kind of keep their story straight and make sense of it all, because the more they know their story, the more they're going to be able to tell it. So there's just a couple really good ideas, and it's all about showing your skill set. So that's the most important thing, because behind your accomplishments is the power of your skill and what value you have to bring to that position. And your knowledge, right? So these are the stories that I think really what I wanted to talk about today is the portfolio shouldn't just be a scrapbook of your awards, reference letters, and newspaper clippings or whatever. It should really be stories behind these things. And so for every award that you have stuffed in your scrapbook of a portfolio, you should have a page that has a story that tells, how did you get yourself that award? How did you get that reference letter? What things did you do in that position? And in fact, a lot of us don't have awards. So in your portfolio, if you don't have a lot of awards to highlight, then there should be little stories in there of what value did you bring to each position you've had? What benchmarks do you have? What accomplishments do you have? And what knowledge did you gain? So if you don't have that in your portfolio, I really encourage you to begin to start to do that. Take a white piece of paper, even if you have to, and type out a story about how did you affect a change at a certain job? Or how did it affect you, and what knowledge did you learn at that job? It could be something like you helped build the health and safety manual and you learned all about the knowledge behind health and safety. It could be that you shadowed managers and learned a little bit about how the management style of a certain job was, and how that and how they hired and how the payroll worked. So you want to document that. And I know that a lot of people can talk about a little bit about what they've learned on these jobs, but I really encourage people to document it, because you want to use this portfolio as a novel of yourself, the story of yourself. And you don't want to be in an interview kind of hemming and hawing and oh yeah, I've got a good example now, what was that again? And just put those examples down on paper, stick them in your portfolio. I encourage people to use this digital technology to do that. It can be more fun because it's more visual and you can use color and creativity. But even at the end of the day, if you can just stick your accomplishments on paper and stick them in your portfolio, if you have no awards or no reference letters, you still should have a whole slew of knowledge building examples and experiences that you've had from your past experiences. It could be philosophies that you've gained, insights that you've gained, awareness, any wisdom that you've gained, any theories you've learned, any hands-on new things that you've acquired. So it really is, there should really be at every job, and even if you were working at, say, a clerk at Tim Hortons, there really should be some knowledge that you've gained, and even if the biggest thing that you've learned at a job is how to get there on time, then document it, because that could even be a good piece of knowledge for you to take forward, is how did you develop the skills to get your butt to work on time every day? And I know that sounds lowly, but in some cases, for some people, that's a big accomplishment for them. So we want to talk about the results too, because the accomplishments that you want to put forward should always be related to what results you had at the positions that you worked for. So it might be as simple as increasing sales or being able to successfully meet your goals. You may not have done anything noteworthy, but if you can talk about how you were successful day to day in your duties and activities, Not just that you performed duties and activities, but that how you felt that the result of what you did was valuable to that company you work for. It's really important to get that across to yourself, because if you know your story well, you will be able to tell your story well. Because if we go further into this, what is the purpose? Why were you even employed? So this helps you reflect on, why was I a cashier at Tim Hortons? Well, it was to provide customer service, help people make decisions, properly prepare food. These things are all the purpose of your position. So really good to know that, and really good to understand why people hire you in the past, so that you can understand why people will hire you in the future. I know that most of us, the purpose behind us getting a job is for pay, and of course to gain experience. And so if we can try to find bigger value in what we've done, then that's really what employers want to hear when we're in the job interview. So again, let's use the portfolio as not just a scrapbook to stick stuff in, but let's use the portfolio to tell our story. So there should be accomplishments in that story, and in those accomplishments, it should be able to allow us to learn a more sense of purpose of why we were in these positions and why we can be in future positions. So the main real goal of our presentation today was to show you a little bit of technology that we can use as part of our portfolio, and there's other technologies out there. There's Visio, Microsoft Visio, there's PowerPoint. You can even use Microsoft Word or Publisher, but try to use some graphics. Use the technology that we have. There's lots of opportunity to learn more about how you can embed hyperlinks so your portfolio can take you to different places technically. Use the technology. It can be fun, and it allows you to really help you to tell your story, because you don't want to just show what's in your portfolio, but more importantly, you want to be able to tell about what's in your portfolio. So you want to have stories behind every accomplishment, because, and I know I keep saying this, but this is the important thing. The idea behind the portfolio is not just to stick a bunch of stuff in there and leave it, but the idea, I believe, behind the portfolio is to get your story straight, right? Because if you know your story well, then you can tell it well. And you want to be able to go into an interview and be excited about every question you get, because you're hopefully going to be able to remember the stories that you've already jotted down and recorded in your portfolio, or you might even pull out your portfolio and show them the credentials or the accomplishments that you have. And while you're showing them an award, you can be telling them why you got the award, what it meant to you, what skills, what knowledge, and what purpose that it all has. And so if you can use your portfolio to answer questions in the interview, that's really the ultimate goal. Somebody asks you a question of, how do you know how to use Excel, for instance, and you can pull out an example of something that you've built in Excel, or a reference letter that talks about your skill in Excel. Well, that really is the main goal. And so really that's what I wanted to talk about today. And I know that we all have this technology, but I don't know if there's a lot of people using PowerPoint to build their portfolios in. And so, not that I'm trying to sell PowerPoint, but I think it's the easiest technology to use to do this. I'd be available too also to help people after the presentation if they have any questions about online portfolios and fully digital portfolios. But whether you do it all on paper, or you use a bit of digital and paper, or a little bit of both, the main idea I want to get across is you got to be telling stories, because that's what interests interviewers. And the portfolio is really just a way to help tell those stories with more ease and more confidence. So you're not always trying to recollect and remember things, and little details are gonna fade away, so you want to record them so that it's really easy for you to answer questions with conviction and confidence and with clarity.